UT Austin professor says that critical race theory is much needed in our schools, though I have my doubts about that. Notre Dame students and faculty shriek in horror at the idea of Chick-Fil-A being added to their dining plan. And in our top story of the week, Princeton University is finally talking about something that we should have been talking about all along. They are taking a stand, and it's saddening that it's taken until 2021 to wake up to this blatant injustice. I am, of course, talking about racist soap dispensers. Plus, in our woke tweet of the week, we'll talk about UNC's student body president, who said Nikole Hannah-Jones' tenureship is, quote, the beginning of a revolution. That's interesting. I wonder what the revolution is. I have my theory, and we'll get into that. I'm Addison Smith. This is the Campus Countdown. In our number 3 story of the week, UT Austin professor Kevin Coakley wrote an article for USA Today defending critical race theory and criticizing Texas state legislation banning it in schools, calling it much needed. Reading now from Campus Reform, writing in USA Today, Kevin Coakley argued in favor of critical race theory and against Texas's move to prohibit it in public schools. Coakley argues that the, quote, ultimate goal of anti-CRT efforts is to prevent any discussion about racism that presents America as less than perfect. But contained in the text of Texas House Bill 3979, which goes into effect on September 1st, is a requirement that students are taught about the history of white supremacy, including but not limited to the institution of slavery, the eugenics movement, the Ku Klux Klan, and the ways in which it is morally wrong. Coakley argues throughout his piece that the banning of critical race theory in particular will inhibit the ability of students to engage in, quote, much-needed discourse about race and systemic racism in this country. He defines critical race theory as an academic concept which posits that racism is not simply acts of individual bias or prejudice, but rather is embedded in institutions, policies, and legal systems. Coakley states that critics of critical race theory use it as an umbrella term to describe any examination of systemic racism, though this doesn't appear to be true of the Texas CRT bill. Critical race theory is not hostile, divisive, or anti-American, Coakley writes. Sure. This characterization is a politicized misrepresentation of the theory that prevents and penalizes any discussion of the idea that systemic racism is, unfortunately, still very much present in American society. Okay, so critical race theory has been dominating the headlines as leftist academics like Coakley in K-12 and colleges just fawn over the ideology. But they seem to be promoting two different messages at the same time. Because on one hand, academics like Coakley sing the wonders and glories and praises of critical race theory and talk about how important and crucial it is. But on the other hand, when people question critical race theory or demand it be removed from the classroom, what do we hear? We hear people like AFT President Randy Weingarten insist that CRT isn't being taught in public schools. Oh, relax, we aren't teaching critical race theory. That's only a legal theory taught in law school. Calm down. You're worried about nothing. That's what we hear. The problem with that is that Ibram Kendi himself spoke at an AFT event, and he said that teaching anti-racism was the prudent thing for teachers to do. So which one is it? CRT is wonderful and necessary, but at the same time, conservatives need to stop complaining about CRT because it's only taught in law school. Which one is it? Moreover, if critical race theory is as great as you say it is, why would you try to deny teaching it? What are you hiding? Well, shouldn't you be proud of critical race theory if it's as great as you tout it to be? You would be, unless you're trying to hide something or unless there's more to the story. Our number 2 story of the week hurts me on a personal level. I've been a longtime lover of the Lord's most holy earthly institution. I'm not talking about church, though I love that too, but I'm talking about Chick-Fil-A. And per usual, the libs want to destroy everything near and dear to us, to me. Such is the case for Notre Dame, as students and faculty alike are opposing the university's consideration of adding Chick-Fil-A to its dining plan. Campus Reform has the report. Over 180 University of Notre Dame students and faculty have signed an open letter opposing the addition of Chick-Fil-A on campus. While a large portion of the student body would approve of the decision, we hope to show that many of us oppose the addition of Chick-Fil-A, the open letter states. On July 1st, 2 Notre Dame undergraduates published an op-ed in the school's student newspaper, The Observer, arguing that Chick-Fil-A should not be on campus. The students state that they have serious ethical concerns about the company and that a different restaurant would better fit the Catholic University's mission. Our first concern relates to Chick-fil-A's long history of antagonism towards the LGBTQ+ community. Over the past 2 decades, Chick-fil-A has donated significant sums to groups that oppose LGBTQ+ rights. From 2003 to 2012, the restaurant's charitable arm gave over $5 million to queer-phobic groups, including groups supporting conversion therapy. Despite public outcry and promises to halt anti-LGBTQ+ donations, in 2017 the donations to anti-LGBTQ+ organizations resumed, including the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, oh no, the Paul Anderson Youth Home, and the Salvation Army. My goodness. The students raised further concerns regarding Chick-fil-A CEO Dan Cathy's Christian faith and personal opposition to same-sex marriage, citing his leadership as regressive. Chick-fil-A is simply not a great restaurant for Notre Dame, and there's no need for another fast food restaurant on campus. Consisting primarily of fried chicken and potatoes, the menu at Chick-fil-A does not supply an array of options suitable for a diverse campus community. However, a large number of Notre Dame students are in favor of adding Chick-fil-A to campus dining. Earlier this year, a group of students created an Instagram account urging the university's administration to bring a Chick-fil-A to campus, citing the fact that Notre Dame does not have an at Chick-fil-A on campus is a Chick-fil-A abomination. Okay, first of all, whoever said that is absolutely correct. It is an abomination, and I love the wordplay. This whole boycotting Chick-fil-A because of their biblical stance on sexuality is just frivolous, especially when you consider the fact that Notre Dame, like they said, is a Catholic university. And it's even sillier when you think about the fact that these anti-CFA warriors are the same type of people who drive around with coexist bumper stickers. Now, I think the whole coexist principle thing is shallow and flawed too, but I'm not the one adopting their bumper sticker slogans. The point is that if you don't like a company because their founder takes a certain religious stance on an issue like marriage, you don't have to eat there. Chick-fil-A doesn't refuse service to homosexuals, doesn't refuse employment to them, doesn't harm them or interfere with them or their lives in any way. And I hear all the donation stuff. That's anti-LGBTQ+. That basically just means that they believe in heterosexual marriage. So you don't have to agree with them, but don't ruin it for these poor Notre Dame students. Dear God, don't deprive people of the Lord's chicken is the big takeaway here. I feel like there's a lot better things you can do with your time than protesting heterosexual chicken. Anyways, in our top story of the week, we'll be talking about an issue that is long overdue. It's 2021, people, and soap dispensers still have not confessed their inherent racism. But a Princeton University technology course is hoping to change that. They want to build anti-racist technologies and were inspired to do so because, quote, soap dispensers don't see dark skin. Reading now from Campus Reform, a Princeton course offers what it presents as solutions to combat the racial biases built in tech and building actively anti-racist solutions using technology. From soap dispensers that don't see dark skin to facial recognition tools that misidentify black faces, students within the Can We Build Anti-Racist Technologies course have been working to, quote, build and test systems that embrace anti-racism as a core value. This year's Spring 2021 course has produced actively anti-racist solutions. Their words, not mine. Envisioning an augmented reality tool, AR tool, one team of students led by Dora Zhao hope to, quote, reimagine spaces on campus to be more inclusive and celebratory of people of color, according to the Princeton Alumni Weekly. With this tool, students can use phones to replace the names of campus buildings with impactful people of color. PAW lists Stanhope Hall as an example, named after Samuel Stanhope Smith, a former Princeton president who had slaves. 2 rooms within Stanhope Hall were renamed in 2017 after black Princetonians. Further, 2 buildings named after Woodrow Wilson will also be renamed, Princeton announced in June 2020. Another anti-racist solution to renaming buildings will be a website to, quote, unearth the actual racist legacy that may exist at the sites that we choose, Zhao further told PAW. Okay, so let's point out the obvious. Technology can't be racist. It can't be evil or immoral at all. Now, technology can be abused and used for racist or other immoral purposes, but that doesn't seem to be a distinction that Princeton bothers to try and make. They're calling the technology anti-racist. They're saying the technology itself is corrupt, that technology itself is morally flawed. And it makes sense that they say this when you think about how they never want to blame people for mass shootings, for example. They just immediately jump to demands for gun control. The gun is the problem, they say, not the people using them. It's the same thing here. They say we need more gun-free zones, not protection from people who seek to do harm. But back to the racism point. This is the problem with the left. They expand definitions so broad to the point where they can match the definition to anything they want. And for the left, everything is racist. Everything. That's why they're calling denying evolution racist. We saw that last week. It's why they're calling soap dispensers racist. But racism is a human condition because it's an emotion, a negative emotion, and only humans have emotions. Racism is exclusive to humans because humans are the only entities with souls and the ability to make moral judgments and moral acts. That's not breaking news, by the way. This has been pointed out and argued by philosophers going back to ancient Greece. Today's woke tweet of the week is brought to us courtesy of Lamar Richards. Richards is a student body president at UNC, and as you know by now, UNC was recently embarrassed by Nikole Hannah-Jones after they first refused tenureship, caved to the woke mob, and offered her tenureship, only for her to turn it down and go to Howard University. I gotta say, that was very satisfying to see UNC get tossed to the side and humiliated like that after their PC stunt. Anyways, Richards posted a long Twitter thread about the whole UNC controversy. Now, I suffered through reading it, and so now you have to as well. Here's what he unfortunately had to say. Phew, I woke up this morning and chose justice. So let's get into it. Oh boy. A thread. The entire situation happening at #UNC over the past several months is nothing new, not here or at most PWIs. Let's be clear. There's enough blame to go around. Let's get into it. First, the board doesn't bear sole blame for this and any tenure situation, quite frankly. Let's be honest. The board only legally acts upon recommendations. They can't act on anything not in front of them. So let's break this down. If the department and faculty leadership choose who they believe is deserving of tenure and recommend those folks to the board, where does the issue of having few black tenured academics truly begin? Once again, the board is only supposed to act on what it receives. So why aren't more academics of color being submitted for tenure? Let's get into it. So faculty leadership, deans, department chairs, I trust that those letters you wrote in support of Nikole was also your commitment to advancing, supporting, and propelling more academics of color into the tenure process, right? Okay, pause real quick. Two things. One, I hope not. I hope their goal isn't focused on giving people tenure based on skin color. Hopefully it's because they're qualified for it, based on merit, which is probably why, now that you think of it, that they denied Nikole Hannah-Jones tenure in the first place. Secondly, did he just call Nikole Hannah-Jones an academic like 3 times? I'm going to pretend I didn't see that and just keep reading. Oh, trust I'll be there to hold you to this. Next, I noticed a lot of departments that single-handedly ruin the educational experiences and GPAs of marginalized students wrote performative letters about getting at Nikole Hannah-Jones tenure. These are the same departments that held classes and exams on university-mandated wellness and mental health days. The same departments that have 1 or 2 faculty of color in their departments. The same departments that are moving to application-based admission to limit the number of students. Blah, 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 blah. Don't worry, I'm knocking on your door next. Funny, I didn't hear from the General Alumni Association during this crisis, but they're the first ones to line up ask graduating seniors for money to join membership. Oh, trust, I'll be there to follow up. To every performative actor who asked for justice in this situation, coming. You're next. The marathon continues until every systemic racist performative department, unit center, etc. is overturned. He ran out of stuff, so he just said etc. Is overturned, overthrown, and rebuilt. Sorry, that's really funny. After Nikole Hannah-Jones secured tenure at Howard, Richards tweeted again, quote, "The fight was never for her to come to UNC. It was always bigger than that. History will remember this as the beginning of a revolution. Congratulations, Nikole Hannah-Jones. A revolution, you see. Nikole Hannah-Jones teaching a class is the beginning of a revolution. But a revolt against what? He would probably say the system, but I think it's pretty clear. This is a revolt against truth itself, against America, and against history. They're openly celebrating tenureship for a woman whose claim to fame is writing a propaganda history project. It's not even true. Nikole Hannah-Jones essentially admits in the 1619 project that it's built on a false premise. The project itself says it aims to, quote, reframe American history. Jones isn't hiding that, and Richards is very happy to see a journalist with absolutely zero qualifications for tenureship attain it for writing a fake history book. He's glad that the standards are so low. Now, keep in mind, it takes years of professorship to get tenure. Even those hired on tenure track still aren't guaranteed tenure during the review. But Nikole Hannah-Jones skipped all of that and just had it handed to her on a silver platter. She didn't do anything to deserve it besides checking off the intersectionality box and hating America, which, now that I think about it, is what makes her the most qualified in today's higher ed institutions, which has essentially become virtue signal factories churning out the next generation of woke activists. Thank you so much for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment. If you're not already, make sure you're following us at Campus Reform on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.